Hello there, Kevin.
Hi,
Welcome.
Alan. Well, thank you very
Um,
much.
it's good to see you. Thanks for stepping in, having a little chat about your book, about what you believe in, about where you're at, basically, in this author journey. The reason I reached out to you is because of your background as an author who also has several other hats,
Yeah,
many of them to do with nature conservation, which, as you know, is my area of particular interest and focus.
yeah,
Could you tell us a little bit about your different vocations and how you bring them all together in your writing?
certainly. Well, of course, I started as a police officer in the UK, working in and around London. I did that for 25 years. Certainly had an interesting career because I managed to spend a lot of time on a tactical firearms team. And our police officers in the UK are not armed routinely. So I was part of a team that would deal with firearms and violence and all sorts of things. But it was also during the Irish campaign, if you like, the troubles in Ireland, and so we dealt with a lot of terrorism. I was also a hostage negotiator, which was very interesting work.
Wow.
In 2002, I made a decision to leave the police force and retrained as a mountain and expedition guide. And after my training, I found myself a lot in Borneo working for conservation projects, the Royal Society, planting hardwood trees, looking at local people, indigenous people, dealing with animal trafficking or wildlife sale, be it legal or illegal. And I would take clients mainly from the UK or from Western Europe and take them out to different countries in Africa, South America and Asia with a view to doing a conservation project. And that may be planting trees, or it may be dealing with some sort of wildlife habitat or environment. But at the same time, trying to educate them and to say, when you go back to England or to Europe, wherever it might be, give some thought about how you live your lives.
Yeah.
Give some thought about how you can spread the word and how we can change things, because we need to change things. Our relationship with wildlife in particular, the rate that we cut down tropical rainforests, and of course we're reaping what we have done over many years. We're reaping the hardship now with pandemics and
That's right. Destruction of habitats, putting wildlife in closer contact to human settlements.
Exactly.
As never before.
Yeah. So that worked very well. I thoroughly enjoyed that. In fact, I was so busy with my work and perhaps doing a good job. I won an award in 2011 for my guiding work, and that sort of raised my status, if you like. That gave me sort of more prominence in the work I was doing. I took to writing. I had been writing anyway for outdoor magazines, but I took to writing in that I thought I could attract or approach a greater audience. And I took to writing about what it is that I believed in and conservation methods and those sorts of things. But I took to write a novel called Stonechild, if I may, my book.
Yep. There it is. Good cover.
Which was about, we call it eco-fiction. It's telling stories to convince people that there is an alternative way or something to do with conservation. I mean, telling stories by way of trying to convince people has been done since man has evolved. If you think of
it has.
The well-known tribal people, Aboriginals in Australia, Maori in New Zealand, the Maasai in Africa, they all tell stories by way of teaching the next generation, and this is no different. It's a way of getting readers to question what we do now, what could we do better, and how do we make that change.
Yeah.
So I drew on the two experiences of being a firearms officer, if you like, and a hostage negotiator, and someone involved in conservation, and brought the two together with a story where the statues of London come to life with a message that we must change our ways. And if we don't listen, and we don't listen, we end up with the battle for London, which is what the story is all about.
Right, fantastic. The book did quite well, didn't it? It's doing quite well.
It's doing better than I thought,
Yeah.
because I wrote it originally as a sort of young adult fantasy, just as a way of getting across, because I thought I was approaching the younger generation. But in fact, it's taken favour with adults. I suppose a little bit like, if I can steal her glory, Harry Potter,
Yes.
By J.K. Rowling. You know, that was originally written as a young adult book, but really took favour with adults. And mine seems to be taking a lot of favour with adults, much more than I thought. In fact, some of my old bosses in the police have read it and written
really?
which is really surprising.
Well, I found that as well. I found that the book, I do comics about climate change and environmental issues, and they're mainly geared, because of the graphic content, they're mainly geared to middle grade children on a superficial level. But actually, a lot of adults enjoy them as well because of the content. I find it hard to define the genre for that reason. Because
exactly the same. I'm exactly the same.
Exactly the same, yeah.
I posted something recently on Goodreads to say, can you help me discover my genre? And
that's
people
it.
Have all sorts of suggestions. And I've read your the book that you sent me, Captain Polo, which was excellent. And
thank you.
Realise how many topics within the subject of conservation that you actually cover in one book. I mean, it was colossal. And of course, he travels all over the world. You know,
Yes. No, there's a lot. I'd like to talk a bit more about the genre problem, because it is a bit of a pigeonhole system, isn't it? Where you get pigeonholed into defining your category, thinking of a virtual bookshelf. But I think what you write, like myself, and I know I've got another couple of friends who are authors who are in the same boat as we are. We just can't quite fit into those pigeonholes, and it's something we need to break. We need to break those pigeonholes and break them open, because in this time where the planet is under such strain. Well, it's not that it hasn't been before. It has been for the past 200 years. It's just that now we're starting to see the effects, as you well said a few minutes ago. We need more books like this. We need to mix that element of entertainment with education, entertainment, fiction with non-fiction. Have you got any thoughts about that mixture? How to get it right? How do you get it right in your book?
Well, if people want to read books, people want to read fiction because it takes them out of the environment they're in. It's this form of escapism. So we have to find a very fine balance between allowing them to escape into a different world, but at the same time getting across the message we want to get across to them. And I think that is a very delicate balance, as you've identified. And finding that right is, it's got to be entertaining. It can't be what they call an information dump. You can't just dump all this information and then it's no longer entertaining, and we're going to lose our readers.
That's it.
So it's finding a balance, and certainly using the characters within the book. I find that getting the character to ask the questions, as opposed to sounding like it's coming from us. It's in mine, the main character is a 15-year-old girl called Molly Hargreaves. And she theorizes about the way we live our lives. She's educated, she lives in London. She was originally born in Guatemala. She speaks Spanish. But at the same time, she's perhaps had a slightly different upbringing, but she questions the way we live our lives. And why don't we change? And why don't we question? Why don't we do more with what we've actually got?
Yeah, that's it. It's getting that character to kind of step in as our voice. But I find it very exciting to do that, because when you're writing about the non-fiction content in a different context, like in a professional context, like a scientist might be writing a paper, for example, there's no way you can get away with any licenses. You've got to stick to the facts. You've got to look up every single fact. You've got to cite every single fact, author, date, publication. And personally, I've always found that very, very, very frustrating, and it's not something I enjoy. I find it very liberating to get into the fiction, because then you can really use your creativity like you have with your statues, who are so expressive. Um, and that is pure fiction. Uh, but it's so wonderful to have them as your messengers, and have Molly as your messenger as well. And you can really, you know, one of the questions I have for you, Kevin, is how much of your police work is into that book? Because 20 years was a long time to be defusing difficult negotiations and tricky situations.
Yeah, some of the procedural work to do with tactical firearms, firearms being deployed on the streets of London. Yes, that knowledge
Right.
is very much there. The rest of it is about certainly using the medium of the statues. And in the beginning, I questioned myself. You know, can I get away with this?
Yes.
Can I convince my readers that statues could actually come alive? And I've used the two different worlds, the dead world and the living world where we live, and the fact that the statue acts as a link between the two. But when you look at other books, be them magical books or fantasies, you know, there's any number of books that get away with all sorts of things. That's the beauty, as you say. That's the beauty of being a fictional writer. You can do that, and I focus not on so much of the how, but the why. Why have they come to life? We're in such a desperate state at the moment that they've come to life because they cannot remain silent any longer.
That's right.
And the statue of Churchill explains that and says, you know, he says, you know, if it was something simple, it wouldn't be our place to come to life. But the world is coming to an end.
Almost like they're the guardians,
yes,
of the world as we want it to be.
Yes.
Figures of history.
Yeah.
I mean, coming to life as a last resort.
Yeah.
Just having to step in, like the referee has to step in a boxing match to throw the towel.
Yeah, and he explains that they have a communication. All of them have a communication. So they've shared their knowledge and their experiences over centuries.
Yes, that's right.
And they can see where they've made the mistakes. And the recent pulling down of statues around the world, you know, because of racism, and I understand that's a very emotive subject. But you know, whoever you choose, if you were to speak to them on their deathbed and say, you know, did you learn anything? They would have an infinite amount of information to say, yes, I wish I'd done that differently.
Absolutely.
That's where we are now in the world. You know, we will be questioned later on by our children and our children's children, and we should be asking those questions now. What can we do now that is different? How can we change now before it's too late, before our children read?
I think
done what we
I think there is something of an awakening around the world for the first time in that respect. That's kind of my optimistic side coming in. I do think, I mean, we both have been working in conservation for decades. And this is the first time I'm seeing these subjects, as in mass deforestation, global warming, you know, mass extinction of species. It's coming into the media like it has never been before.
Sure.
Which is a good sign, but it's never going to be enough, is it? It's a starting place. So that's why I think books like yours, books like mine, and all the others are out there, and I know they're out there. I think we have a real role to play. It's beyond just publishing a book and making a few bob. It's much more than that, isn't it? It's about about sharing that message.
Absolutely agree. And some of it, I feel, some of it comes from frustration, I suppose. You know, what can we do? There is the power within social media, etc. But until you break into the mainstream, we're small voices, without a doubt. You know, I mentioned the World Guide Awards that I came third in. When that happened, I appeared on Radio 4 and various programs, and you realise that the power is with the people.
Oh yeah.
If people want it to make it viral, they can.
They can.
Yes. If they want to change something, they can. They just have to get behind it, and that's what we need. We need the people to say, enough is enough. We need to change. We need to move on, and we need to change things as a complete entity.
That's right, and so that's a good way to go on to the next and final point, which is the future of Stonechild. I know you've got some exciting plans for it beyond just being a book. Can you tell us a bit about that, and also what if you have any other plans for further books along the line pipeline?
The first book ends in that. Well, it ends. I won't tell you the ending, but
it just ends.
The epilogue, if you
right.
like, is that the Prime Minister, who's involved a lot in this, the Prime Minister of the UK, he is awakened at 4 o'clock in the morning by his secretary to say the President of the United States is on. And he comes onto the phone and he's very worried and nervous. And he says, Prime Minister, the Statue of Liberty is missing.
Oh.
So that leads into...
I love it.
Sequel.
I love it.
And that's what I'm working on at the moment. And the idea is to spend some time when we're allowed to go to America, do the research, and that is a follow-on. Molly, the main character, as I say, will be slightly older, but it gives me a chance to go into the American history, America's history, certainly, but America's role within the great conservation scheme. And
yes.
The moment of change with the change of president and
yes.
what it might bring. So it's an exciting time to...
That is a wonderful way to end the book. I love that. And I think the choice of the Statue of Liberty is so iconic because of all that she represents. And you're living in France, and you may be able to bring in a little bit of the history of the Statue of Liberty from the French, handover of that iconic statue to the US, the new US nation. And there's so much richness that you could put into that. That's wonderful. But I think you told me when our first chat, you said something about doing something with Stonechild as well.
Yeah, when I wrote the book, I wrote it with a sequel in mind, which I've just explained, and secondly, I wrote it in a style that would make a film.
There you go.
So I've approached a company, or I've approached a couple of companies that deal with book publishing, but also with TV and film production.
Yeah.
And it's a real shot in the dark, to be honest. There are so many applications. It's like book publishing. It is, as you know yourself, it's incredibly difficult to get into the market.
Yep.
So anyway, it's early days, but it was written with a view that it would make a very good film. It starts with a statue of Winston Churchill in the House of Commons, and the ministers touch his shoe for good luck before going into chamber, and it starts with him moving his shoe. He doesn't.
Right, love it.
So the graphics, with today's CGI and the equivalent special effects. The statues that come alive with Brunel, Florence Nightingale, Shakespeare, all of them have a great opportunity of really being done well in a film.
Oh, totally. Like that film they made about the night in the Natural History Museum, the series of films, and they can totally do that nowadays. Well, that sounds really exciting, Kevin, and I can't wait to talk to you again about updates on all those lovely, wonderful plans. Thanks so much, and and let's catch up again soon.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.